No.
All right, welcome everyone to this OASIS talk today. I'm super happy to introduce our visitor today, game designer and design educator Eric Zimmerman, who really doesn't need an introduction. He's a part of the founding faculty and an arts professor at the NYU Game Center, has created a ton of games, authored a number of books, including Rules of Play, and his latest book that he will be talking about today, Rules We Break. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Jaakko. Thanks. All right, so, oh, you're moving, the camera follows me. Okay, so I don't have to try and stay on camera. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for hosting me today, and to all the faculty and staff of the program here at Tampere. I actually think it's possible that this was one of the very first times that I was sort of traveling and giving a workshop. Were you around then, Franz? It was. I think it was in the 1990s, and I came here to give a workshop on interactive narrative. Anyway, we'll try and piece together the history, but I was here at the very sort of beginning of my career, and it's really nice to come back and share with you all. So thanks again for having me. Today, I'm going to learn how to advance my slides. Okay. I'm going to talk, just give you a little bit of background, and I'm going to share a new project, which is the book that Jaakko mentioned, and also hopefully we'll be able to interact a little bit over the course of things. So let's see, is this? Okay, so I'm here from the United States. I'm from Bloomington, Indiana. I live in New York City. I teach at NYU. But actually also I married a European, and I'm actually a European citizen as well in Italy. So and I'm on sabbatical this year, based in Italy. So it's nice to it's nice. I don't think I would be so colonizing us to sort of say I'm a European now or something, but I have some connection and relationship with being here in Finland, which is nice. When I was growing up, I had a childhood not just of playing games, but also inventing games, whether they were variations on folk sort of neighborhood physical games like Kick the Can and Ghost in the Graveyard, if you know those sort of classic American games, or playing Dungeons and Dragons with friends, or playing early computer games. My parents were art educators. That was their field. And actually, art education still continues to interest me because I'm an educator myself. And art education studies an aesthetic form, art, visual art, and how it can be a context for learning. And I think even though it's not a very sexy discipline in most contexts, art education doesn't, for example, try and measure the efficiency by which an artwork can sort of inject data into a viewer, right? So instead, art education looks at art as a sort of context for conversation and reflection and discussion about culture and art. And it also has a kind of an interestingly blurry line between studying art in a scholarly way and making art as an artist. And often in art classes, you do both things. So it was an interesting background for me, and it continues to influence my thinking. And when I went to university, I had a weird education because on the one hand, I studied painting, so I studied as an artist, and a lot of my professors were students of Joseph Albers, who helped invent kind of academic modernism, real formalism. We talk about formalism, games and systems and rules, but formalism comes from architecture, and in modernism, the term first came from architecture, but formalism in visual art meant that art is about line, color, and composition, a pure visual medium. And I had professors that did say things like, there are no ideas in art, meaning art is not about politics or even narrative or psychology. It is about these pure visual elements. But at the same time, when I was an art student at sort of the turn of the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, there was all of these other things going on in the art world besides academic formalist modernism, like Barbara Kruger's, Jenny Holzer's truisms, Robert Mapplethorpe's self-portraits causing controversy in the United States because they were funded in part by the government or shown at the National Gallery. So the idea of art as cultural critique and as as a way of engaging with a larger context outside of itself. And I think that I'm just sharing this with you because as a game designer, I think I've sort of managed to carry both of these things with me, right? On the one hand, I'm very interested in the craft, the discipline, the kind of inward-looking aspect of art, of games and how we would talk about games. But I'm also very interested in games as a cultural practice, as a cultural form, and how it's not just an inward-looking discipline, but also something that of course intersects with society at large. At that time, when I emerged as a student into the game industry, this was at a time of Wired magazine was coming out, hot new medium of CD-ROMs that were working with like cultural superstars like Brian Eno and Laurie Anderson, and first wave VR was happening as well. During that time when I started teaching, and this is all just to kind of give you a background where I'm coming from and, I don't know, get a little nostalgic with the other old folks in the room. I started teaching at NYU as an adjunct when I was a working game designer, and I remember seeing this poster. This was for New Voices, New Visions, and so this was by that company, Voyager, that was making these very culturally sexy CD-ROMs. But look what they say. Do not enter this contest if you want home shopping, encyclopedias, and video games to define the information superhighway. By the way, at that time, this was not an ironic use of that. That was actually, an actual kind of like a trendy use of that phrase. So, but I want to do a zoom in because look at the people that were the judges. Okay, Laurie Anderson, Jenny Holzer, okay, mentioned artists, William Gibson, who helped invent cyberpunk, the genre. Art Spiegelman, the comic artist who made Mouse, who won the Pulitzer Prize. Terry Gilliam from Monty Python, who did Brazil, the filmmaker. So like these were the cultural gatekeepers of the time, right? And so somehow video games were part of this kind of like horrible junk food of culture that was sort of, kind of looped in with uncritical capitalism and commercialism and boring stuff like encyclopedias. So anyway, that was the context in which I entered the game industry. I started making digital games. This was my first commercial title, Gearheads, with RGA Interactive. And I worked there for a few years. I worked with Word.com to make Sissy Fight, a game about little girls in conflict on a playground. Innovative for its time. It was the first game to have real-time browser-based interaction, text interaction. At the same time, it was also very much a feminist intervention into games. Everybody was a little girl, and you were. It was not a sort of a standard female representation of a princess to be rescued, or sort of like an action pin-up model, Lara Croft style. So. These were all collaborative projects. I started a company with Peter Lee, Game Lab, an independent studio in New York City. We ran for about 10 years. Diner Dash was our biggest known game, but we worked with people like Lego and New York City-based companies, mostly like MTV, and mostly making browser-based games, online games for mass market. Game Lab spun off a nonprofit sister company called the Institute of Play that Katie Salen was the director of for many years. They looked at the intersection of games and learning and designed whole schools where games and learning were the model games and play were the model for learning at the school. Some more recent stuff I've worked on. This is Dear Reader, a game that Apple published that I worked on with Local Number 12, Colleen Macklin, John Sharp, and Peter Barry, and I and a team of people. This is a game that uses public domain literature as a basis for procedural word puzzle games. I also work as a tabletop game designer. These are some of my titles. From earlier, and Rats is my most recent one that was soft launched with Shut Up and Sit Down, but is actually going to be in a box in about a year or so on shelves. One of my tabletop projects that just launched within the last year is called the Green Games Guide. I've been working with climate scientists, manufacturers, distributors, designers, publishers on a guide for best practices for environmentally sustainably thinking about design and production of tabletop games. So unlike architecture or the fashion industry, where there's been a lot of sort of industry standards published and agreements about environmental sustainable practices, there really isn't anything equivalent in tabletop games. So that was our effort, and that it's ongoing, soft launched. I also work with architect Natalie Pozzi. She and I designed large-scale museum installations together. This is from the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington. Natalie and I are speaking on Monday, if you're going to be in Helsinki, at the opening of the Games Now conference that Anna-Kaisa Koltama is organizing. So if you're interested in this kind of work, please come and see us there. Some of these are more installations. Some of them take the form of more performance spaces. This is waiting rooms, which it takes over a whole building, and it's several rooms with people that are sort of playing roles. It's not really like live action theater. It's more of like a weird social immersion experience, but we'll be talking more about that next week. I also teach game design at the NYU Game Center, as Jaakko mentioned. In New York City, we have a bachelor's program and a master's program. It's really a vibrant community of people that are playing games and studying games and mostly making games. We're in a school of the art, so we see games as a sort of form of culture alongside film and theater and dance. And most of our students are game makers, but again, we kind of mix theory and practice there. Jaakko mentioned this book, which I wrote with Katie Salen. This was us trying to figure out many years ago, what is game design? How does it work? What would it mean if there was a discipline for game design? And other books that I've worked on since then. With Katie, an anthology. More recently, I co-edited this posthumous book by Bernie DeKoven, a really amazing and wonderful person and a fun book. But today I wanted to share something new. So the focus of the talk is on the rules we break. So this is my latest book, and I'm very excited to share this with you, and especially with this particular group, because this book is a compilation of all of the ways that I teach game design. So where rules of play is maybe a little more theoretical, this is sort of all of the methods and weird games and exercises that over the years that I've kind of been using to trying to figure out what is game design, how do we teach it, what would it mean to sort of teach someone about playing game design. So the book is about these three big ideas. And we're going to go into them a little bit today, but basically the book is all about what are ways for thinking about and learning about and studying these ideas of play systems and design, and also specifically I think I talked about that I have a sort of a split brain. Like part of me wants to understand what are games, what's the craft of game designers, but I also want to think about how are games relevant to culture outside of games. And so one of the things I've realized is that I think that game design is actually a way of thinking and a way of being and a sort of a methodology and a set of ideas that I feel has a lot of relevance to fields outside of game design, to other maybe other designers and other fields that wouldn't think of games as relevant. So that's also part of the idea of this book, is game design maybe in some ways relevant to other things outside of games. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, and I'm going to share some of the ideas, and we're going to play a few of the exercises. We just have an hour, and so these will be some little short ones. I think I'm visiting a class with the master's students after this, and we'll have a chance to go into a little more detail. Maybe play one of the longer exercises there. Also want to say, I feel a little bit weird of it. It's just definitely just here to sort of talk about my new book as like a product kind of thing. But I feel like, okay, we're sort of educating the graduate students in the time-honored academic tradition of the book promotion talk, right? So this is also, comes with the profession, and this is what we do. But so yes, I'm promoting this product. On the other hand, I am genuinely excited to share with you the ideas and some of the stuff that's in the book. And maybe you'll find some of it useful. Okay, so I said the book is divided into these three sections. So a little bit of this talk is sort of like a tour of the book, if you don't mind. So this is the section, for example, on play. And each section is divided into 2 parts. There are little mini essays, 1-page essays about topics relating to play. And then there are exercises. In this case, the exercises are about social play and physical play and playing with meaning. This is the systems section, similar in the design section. The little essays look like this. They are really just very short essays. So each one is like a little amuse-bouche, I guess, a little taste on a topic that's relevant to something relating to that section of the book. So Being Someone Else is about role-playing and how games can sort of play with identity. It's because Jacos here would so love to talk about this example of Manor House, a reality show from the early 2000s, but we'll talk later about how ideology gets embedded in that. But shared authorship is very different. It's from the design section, and it's about how do you build a culture of collaboration where people feel like they are not they have an authorial voice in a project that's being co-authored. So the sections are actually quite different, a different kind of focus, and the little essays sort of pick apart little ideas. But most of the book are these exercises. So they're actual activities to do. And again, these are exercises that I've done. I've done them with kids in sort of youth after school programs. I've done them with a lot of university students. But I also hold workshops with industry designers. I was working with Tencent for a few years, giving intensive workshops to their lead game designers. So these are all time-tested exercises that I know are useful and meaningful to a variety of audiences. In this case, it is a simple little dice game, Utopia 2099. The book tells you what you learn. It talks about, I know you can't read this from back there, like balancing a game system through iteration, a little bit about randomness and meaning, and then about rules and procedures as a way that you can depict, in this case, characters, the content of a game. The exercises look like this. They're often very short, so it's a few pages. The black text is the running the exercise, the steps, and all the red text are things like things to think about or discussion questions. So you can just focus on the exercises, or you can talk about there's more if you're going deeper and actually running the exercise yourself. So I'm kind of sharing this with you again because as a designer, the form and the content are both part of the experience and part of the ideas of the book. So for me, the format of the book is very much part of the authoring of the book. Something for you all to think about for your future books too, right? It's not just the text and the content, it's the whole experience of reading the book. But I've been talking about it. Let's play a game. We'll start with a game to play, just to give you a sense of what they're like. This is a game called Zen Counting. Some of the exercises are things that I've made up, and some I am curating. This actually is an exercise by Bernie DeKoven, who you may know. He wrote the book, The Well-Played Game, and one of the single most influential people, I think, on me as a game designer and my thinking about games. And it's in his book, The Infinite Playground, that I mentioned. Okay, so let's play Zen Counting. I think I'll do, maybe for this first game, I'll ask for volunteers. So you'll come up here. I promise it's a very low pressure game, not too much. Just who's interested? Who wants to try it out? Come on up. Thank you so much. A few more people, brave souls. I promise there's nothing physically strenuous or mentally taxing. Why don't we have you? You can all sit up here. I really like these seats. Grab a seat. Anybody else? A few more people? Anybody interested in taking part? No? Okay, yeah, come on up. Yeah, a few more. Yeah, you too. Come on up. Awesome. Okay, I think we have, this is enough. We could use more, but this is okay for now. All right, so make yourselves comfortable, and I'll explain Zen Counting. Okay, when we start the game, you're all going to close your eyes. When we start, you can keep them open for now. That's okay. And the way Zen Counting works is that one of you, whoever wants to begin, is going to start counting, saying a number, the first number, which is 1. So we'll say 1, someone else will say 2, someone else will say 3, etc. And we'll see how high we can count. There's a couple of twists to the game. One is that, or a couple of rules, I should say. One is that if you say a number, let's say you say the number 3, you can't say the next number. So you can't say 3 and then 4 and then 5. You have to wait until someone else comes in with 4. Then you could come in with 5 or wait till 6 or 7, but you can't say 2 numbers in a row. And we're counting just whole numbers up. The other sort of twist to the game is that if 2 people say a number at the same time, if you overlap even a little bit, then we're going to start over at 1. Okay, so that's okay. Oh, these are game designers. You're saying, interesting rule. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So to get settled, let's have all of the players close your eyes for a moment. This is a very calm game about listening. So let's just take a few deep breaths. You can join us, audience, if you want to. Let's just breathe in together and out. We're just settling into the moment. Okay, let's try again. Breathe in and out. Okay, so now we're here. We're ready to play Zen counting. Whoever wants to start can begin.
2, 3,
4,
5,
6,
7,
8,
9,
10,
11,
12,
13,
14.
15,
16,
17,
18,
19,
20,
21,
22,
23,
24,
25,
26,
27,
30,
31,
33,
34,
35,
36,
37,
38,
39,
40.
41.
Oh! Wow! Oh my gosh! That was maybe the most successful first game of Zen counting I have ever seen. And also, it was like rapid fire counting. I don't know how you all did it. That was incredible. Do any of you want to comment on that experience that you just had?
It reminds me, there's a card game called The Mind,
Yeah.
where you
Yeah.
have cards and you lay them out. It reminds me of that, but this is...
I thought exactly the same game. Yeah, mine.
Right. The Mind is sort of a more advanced version. It's got some more stuff. This is sort of a more elemental version.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Yeah, but like it's kind of fair state. But yeah, it was... And then I like that we were starting to try and push against things. Like I took a deep breath to like make space for myself, but didn't say a number.
Right.
I said 30 before we were at it.
Right. Right.
Question, like, have we already done 30 or do we have to do 30?
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share? Was it calming? Was it nerve-wracking? I'm curious what the emotional experience was.
I think there were moments, sort of when it was going rapidly forward, this was actually relaxing.
Yeah.
And when you were just waiting for somebody to say something, that was
The silences between the numbers felt long, but when it started like going like number, then it was like, oh yeah, this is like how it's supposed to go. It's a nice flow now.
I think to some extent you feel some kind of connection while doing it.
But then it also made me think about some cheating strategy. I have at least 2 in mind already.
Oh, cheating strategies. Yes, there definitely are cheating strategies as well. And you almost started going down the line, but then you were not doing that. Sometimes groups of players find a cheating strategy. You could just bounce back and forth between 2 people, and then they realize it's boring, and so they break it. But it's interesting that it's a collaborative game, and you can sort of decide how to play. You know, you're not making someone lose if you find a cheating strategy.
I kind of like waited for us to say something, and then I followed from there.
In my head, I was like, come on.
Well, we could talk more. These are great comments, but let's thank our players very much. That was a fabulous demonstration of Zen counting. So thank you for that. So let me just say, so we played the game, we talked about it a little bit, but okay, how is this an exercise, right? How is this more than just playing a game? Well, there's many ways that you could use something like this. So sometimes in a workshop, I might use Zen counting as a way of talking about or actually as a way of just getting a group into sort of alignment. It's a game that kind of forces you to sort of listen and often can kind of bring you into sync with each other. So maybe it's a good warm-up exercise for, say, a brainstorming activity or something like that. You also can analyze the game. So some of our players were talking about, I don't know who mentioned it, but about listening to the spaces between the numbers. And it's, you know, it is kind of meditative, but then it's also it's also a little bit can be nerve-wracking. Maybe the more you play, it kind of the more is at stake with each number. So we can actually analyze the game and analyze, even in such a simple and elemental game, the specific rules and design decisions that result in a particular experience, right? And we're often trying to design games that are, for example, collaborative. Zen counting is effortlessly collaborative, right? It's challenging. It's that you don't have to explain, we have a group goal, this is that, don't work against. It just sort of works right immediately. And then, of course, there's other theoretical things. Like we had some great examples of creative player behavior, rule breaking, right? We talked about breaking the game. You could break the game, but you didn't break the game, or you tried different numbers, even the breathing in. I'm about to say something, right? So there's it leads to other topics too. Just to say that there's even in such a simple game, there's always a lot for us to talk about. Okay, so and again, this is Zen counting in the book, very short, some instructions and some discussion questions to have. So okay, so let's ask a bigger question now, the sort of so what question, right? So clearly this is fun, and we could maybe learn some things about games. But if I said that I'm interested in these ideas being relevant to people outside of games, well, what do I mean by that? If these are not just for game designers. So my feeling is that games have something to say in our present moment, and that games can be a way of sort of looking at what's happening across society and media today. Maybe some of what I'm going to say seems pretty sort of basic for all of you, but we'll see. You know, the general argument is that the 20th century was maybe about the rise of information, the moving image as a dominant cultural form. Of course, you could make that argument that, you know, this was plenty of culture going on in the 20th century in poetry and music, but for me, in advertising and propaganda, personal narratives, news, there's the moving image was sort of a dominant cultural form. In the 21st century, though, there's something else happening in media and culture, that media is somehow, and again, I'm making a very general argument, so general it's so hard to disagree with me, but you know, media is becoming more participatory, more interactive, more modular, more systemic, and my point is that games actually are one of the cultural forms that has for thousands of years been modular, systemic, participatory, interactive, right? Every game is a system of inputs and outputs for exploring cause and effect. And again, I'm hopefully saying things that are pretty familiar to all of you. So for me, games are about understanding how literacy works in the 21st century, but also about practicing and designing and sort of expanding what these literacies can be as well. Okay, I'm not myself a literacy scholar, but I've learned from some of them what it is. This idea that when I say literacy, I mean creating and understanding meaning. Can I borrow a piece of paper? Do you mind if I actually tear one out?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, I should have had this prepared in advance. But let's say, for example, I write something on here. Oh, hello, that was also my first slide. But so that we can frame this as an active literacy, creating and understanding meaning. I made some meaning, you're now understanding meaning. There's also a context in which this is taking place, cultural context, architectural context, institutional context. But I also want to say that design can also be thought of as a way of creating and understanding meaning as well. And so part of the sort of so what is how these ideas about meaning and how we can create and understand it connects to the real world. For example, the meaning of democracy and thinking of democracy as a design problem and how systems get gamed. And I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's get back to the book for a second. So you can learn game design from the book, you can learn the craft, but as I said, it's really about teaching design through play, in the big sense of design, problem solving, collaborating, and making new kinds of meanings. And these three main concepts of the book are sort of like three handles for wrapping our heads around all of this idea. So the rules we break is less of like a book about information that I'm trying to impart, and it's more like a recipe book. It's like a it's a list of things to do with each other, coming up with projects, playing and modding, and talking about games. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the ideas that are in each of these three sections. For example, play, we looked at a little bit already. Play is about the sort of messy, wild, creative improvisation of playing. And for me, play is not just about being goofy and silly, but it's really a potentially profound way of understanding how we relate to each other, how meaning is made, and how we can critically engage with the world. And how am I doing on time? We're about halfway through. Okay, I'm doing okay. So what do I mean by that? That sort of play is an interesting model. In the rules of play, Katie Salen and I talk about this idea of play. We call it free movement in a more rigid space, right? So in English, play can mean different things, but it also means this sort of like little bit of wiggle room, like on a steering wheel, right? And the wiggle room is there because there's a steering wheel and a drive shaft and tires, and so there's a sort of a functional system there, right? A functional system that I turn this and it turns the tires, but the play in that system, the little wiggle room of the gears or the steering wheel, the play is there because there's a more functional system, but it's also where that system is not actually doing its logical thing, right? It's sort of like something else is happening here. So let's use a different example. Like when you think of a child and you see the child walking playfully, like what's an example of a kid walking playfully? What's one example? Someone? Think of a young kid walking playfully. What are they doing? They're skipping. Okay, skipping is one. What's another one? Yes?
Try not to touch the cracks.
Right, try not to touch the cracks. There's no cracks here, but you can, maybe I'm, stepping and trying to avoid cracks or spots. I don't know. Yes?
Walking backwards or sideways.
Yeah, walking backwards or sideways. Yeah, like all of these. And so we immediately recognize these activities as walking playfully, right? But why? What is it about them? Like, why is that playful? Why do we call that playful? What does that mean? Well, this idea of play as free movement within a more rigid structure, you can think of playful walking as playing with the structures of walking. So walking is about, on a utilitarian level, it's about efficient transportation. I'm getting from point A to point B as quickly and directly as possible, right? That's sort of the utility of walking. When I'm playfully walking, I'm, actually skipping might get you there faster, but if you're spinning around, if you're avoiding cracks, I'm playing with that utilitarian structure, the sort of logical function of walking. I'm playing with it, right? I'm not just, I'm taking that sort of rigid structure and I'm doing something transgressive or unexpected or inappropriate with it. I'm also maybe playing with other structures. Maybe I'm playing with the structures of my body, right? Maybe like, oh, it's fun to go up and down more than I would normally just walking. Or maybe I'm playing with, how far away from my parents I can get if I'm, misbehaving, or what I'm supposed to do in public, right? Like being playful lets me do things that are maybe inappropriate in public. So this idea of playing this is how, for me, play is an interesting potential critical lens. That when we play with something, right? Because we are playing with those structures, we're questioning the way we use our bodies, or what public space is about, or what it means to efficiently move from one place to another place, right? So anyway, just giving you a little taste of sort of, for me, the ways that this concept of play is a really rich and interesting concept. But it's always more fun to actually play something than just talk about play. So we're going to play another game. 5 Fingers. Now, I invite all of you to play. You don't have to play. If you're being forced to play, it's not play. It's something else. It's a labor camp or something, right? So that's not that. Or maybe it's school. I don't know. So So play if you want. I'm going to explain how to play, but and then you can decide if you want. But what you're going to do is you're going to sort of, when we start, you're going to sort of turn and face with a group of people, maybe like 4, 5, 6, 7 people, just the people around you. You might turn in your seat and face them. And here's how you play 5 fingers. You're all going to put up one hand, and these are your 5 fingers, and this is your life. You want to hold on to your 5 fingers because when you are out of fingers, you're out of the game. Okay, so you want to hold on to your 5 fingers. Here's how the game works. Somebody begins, someone in the group begins, and what you do on your turn, and you're going to take turns going around the circle. When it's your turn, you're going to point at someone, and they're going to lose a finger. And that's the game. Then it's the next person's turn, and the next person, and the last remaining person with any fingers is the winner. Okay? Are there any questions? Does it seem pretty clear? All right, some people are looking terrified. It's a fast game, so find people near you if you want to play, and go ahead and start playing. You can do a big group. This is good. This is good. Okay, 3. Wow, very tight little group. Okay, this looks good. Another group of 3 here. Wow. You're going to go around the circle. You're going to go around the circle. Yeah.
Who points out after?
You go around the circle. You go around the circle. Okay, that's all right. Cheating's nothing wrong with cheating.
No, I'm just taking a chance.
Ah, okay. All right, let's finish up big groups. Let's finish up some of the end games happening here. Okay. All right. Be decisive. We're just waiting for you to finish. All right. I think everybody finished the game. Give yourselves a round of applause. Nice job, everybody. Okay, so again, lots to talk about here. We don't have time for a full discussion, but there's, for example, such an interesting relationship between rules and play, right? That we talk about a lot. The rules are sort of the formal elements of games, and then the play, which is their opposite, right? Play is not logical and mathematical and complete, but play is sort of spontaneous and improvisational and creative. And I was explaining the rules and there was some giggles, but as soon as a game started, there was sort of laughter erupting from the room, right? So there's something about our actual embodied emotional experience of play that happens when we enter into these systems and decide to play. We could talk about meaning here. We could talk about the idea that, that when you point at something in real life, it means something. Maybe it means this: I will have that piece of cake, the apple cake today, or maybe it means, yes, would you like to contribute to this discussion in a class? I don't know what point could mean, but in this game, we give that gesture a very specific meaning, right? So games are situations where we are giving meaning to things. We could talk about the taboo kind of play, right? The idea that play often lets us do things that we can't normally do in everyday life. In this case, you get to be sort of playfully cruel to people, right? And gang up on them and maybe murder them, or at least kick them out of the game. And of course, there was lots of interesting creative rule breaking and bending. Maybe there was some creative play. I definitely saw one person with one finger left that was using the middle finger in the back of the room. And then also, I heard some discussions about people sort of breaking and playing with the rules. I gave this game 2 days ago in a workshop in Helsinki, and there was a group where one person refused to point at anyone because he said he didn't want to kill anyone, and then he decided to just point at himself, right? So I hadn't seen that before. That was a really nice way that he explored that mechanic. So again, even in these very elemental games, they're getting at some of these sort of very deep ideas. Again, and in the book, it is, again, the instructions for running the exercise, and then, suggestions for, how you might talk about them. Again, it's not that I'm saying this game is about this and here's this idea, but the idea that through playing games and discussing them in this case, you can actually go quite deep into how they work. And I should also mention that into some of the ideas that I'm talking about. Some of the games also talk about how they can work remotely. So for example, Five Fingers does work as a video remote game. So the exercises that we've done so far from the play section, Zen counting and Five Fingers, and many of the other exercises are often physical games. I think Ninja is in this section. And I find that I love returning designers and researchers to their bodies. These play exercises are really good ways of not just talking about games, but sort of unlocking creativity and getting people kind of loose and playful with each other. So the little essays in the play section are about conflict, emergence, desire, collaboration, different kinds of rules and how to break them. But let's move on to systems. That takes a close look at how the parts of a complex structure interrelate to form a whole. And I've talked a little bit about this idea of what's going on in the 21st century. I've written a little bit about this. I call the 21st century the ludic century, in the sense that it has some kind of interesting connection to the way games are structured and the way games create meaning. And it's really because so many aspects of our lives are connected to networks of digital information, right? The ways that we work and research and learn and communicate and conduct our finances and connect with our governments, all are kind of mediated by digital networks of information in a way that really wasn't true not less than 100 years ago, even 30, 40 years ago. And games have a new relevance because even though they're an ancient form of human expression, as a form of media, art, entertainment, culture, again, they are particularly modular, customizable, and systemic, and they are systems. They are a set of parts that interrelate to each other to form a whole. And so games just happen to be great context for pushing and pulling at the inputs and outputs of a system, which to me always connects back to real-world systems. So just to take a real-world example for a second, gerrymandering, this idea that In the United States, it's called gerrymandering, and that term has its own history, but because of redistricting in the shape of a salamander by a politician named Jerry. But the idea is that there's a really horrible, broken system of American democracy in many ways. This is one of the design problems, that the party in power every 10 years gets to redraw the districts by which they will again be elected, right? And today, using software that by block you can really analyze and find out exactly how you can strategically redesign the those voting districts, you can really strategically put yourself back into power. And in game system terms, we would call this a positive feedback loop, right? You get a little bit of power, and then you get more entrenched in power. And like in a real-time strategy game like StarCraft 2, where if you get an early advance on your resources, you can build on those resources and get even more in power, right? In a game context, however, this is balanced because there's different strategies, and only one of them is about sort of building up economic power, right? You can do a rush strategy, a defensive strategy, or an economic win. And so other factors and other ways of playing with the system balance it. And to take another example, in the game of pool, like in the game of, let's talk about the 8-ball, where you're trying to get in stripes or solids, there's also sort of positive feedback loops. So what's the positive feedback loop here? The advantage, if you're ahead, it helps you get even more ahead. What does anyone know? Maybe if you know pool, what's the positive feedback loop here? Any thoughts? Yes. Yes. If you get a ball and you can go again, right? So if you're a little bit ahead, it helps you get ahead. But the design of the game has things that balance that out. There's actually negative feedback loops existing simultaneously. What's a negative feedback loop that happens? Yes, we have our pool master over here. Yeah.
The more balls you score and the less balls you have to play.
Yes, exactly. And it's very elegant, right? So even though I'm able to do 2 or 3 shots in a row, if I'm getting balls in, my game is getting much harder. The game is still, because I have only a few targets left on the board, my opponent has all of their balls out, it's easier for them to catch up. But that's because that's a game, and someone designed it, right? Or maybe it evolved over time, but that's what a successful game is like. Unlike democracy, right? Without these kind of balances in place, the majority can re-entrench itself, and the result is what seems like unfairness, right? In other words, the spirit of democracy is that the government is representing the people that elected them, but in this case, it's the people that are elected that are choosing the voters. And it's really a kind of a topsy-turvy system. And in America, there's all kinds of voter disenfranchisement, and it's very often along lines of socioeconomic class and race, in addition to ideology, for example. And the reason is because the American system has this winner-take-all system within, for example, the Electoral College or within these voting districts, which is a common Eurogame mechanic. Like this is from El Grande, and so here in Granada, for example, red is going to take this district, right? So red, that big one is worth 5, I believe. So red is going to take this district, and so this is also an area control, kind of winner-take-all within a region, but the game balances that, right? It balances it in a few ways. First of all, if you see that little domino thing, there's a first, second, and third place, so it's not just about one party or winning everything. There's actually rewards for second place. But even more significantly, the reward that you get for having most in an area is connected to a different system of the game than the one that gives you more pieces, right? So there's not an immediate feedback loop of kind of, I get more power, which immediately helps me get more of the same kind of power. And that's because this is a designed game, right? As opposed to democracy, which is really a big problem. So can we blame people, can we blame voters and political parties and politicians for things like gerrymandering? Aren't they really just playing the game really well, right? So I think the interesting paradox for us is that it's sort of game-like thinking that's gotten us into this mess, which is like strategically, defining, using software to sort of hyper-analyze and min-max and sort of be a hardcore gamer about politics, but I'm hoping that it can also that game-like thinking can also maybe get us out, right? In terms of the kinds of thinking that we need to do to be part of not just the problem, but the solution. And for me, the systems thinking, this idea is a big part of that. Training in systems thinking, which I think is a big part of solving these kind of contemporary complicated problems. So some of the exercises in this part of the book are often more tabletop-y. For example, Trouble in Dodge City is about a sort of a very broken game with an economy that you try and fix. Get Out is a sort of a level design exercise that uses puzzle design and level design to think about how games teach people and how difficulty can be scaled. And even narrative exercises too. So A Deck of Stories is about using a systemic way of sort of procedurally telling a story that involves writing, but also kind of interactive design as well. The essays dive into the ways that systems behave, like randomness and feedback loops and desire and representation, but also connect back to real-world systems as well. For example, something I know Jaakko has written about, like colonialism in tabletop games. Okay, almost done with this whirlwind tour of the book. So let's just go to the design section now. Design uses games as the occasion to practice inventing new projects and ideas, and it really looks at the process of game design, exploring ideas through actually making things, prototyping, testing, and iteration. And so, why is design important? I would argue that almost everything we're experiencing right now is designed, right? So I don't know, this certainly the building that we're in that shields us from this harsh Finnish winter right now, right? But also the furniture that we're sitting on, the lights and media that's allowing me to be recorded right now, the clothes you're wearing, the food you're digesting, right? That's giving us energy to sort of be together. All of these are aspects of our lives that are designed. So for me, design is really a way of constructing the world, and designers play a part in really the building of our experience. And so I want to think about design as a process, lots of ways of thinking about it, of learning how to solve problems. And the key word there is process, right? So often when we think of design, we think about the end result, right? Like this is sort of an object that was made, but the object is not the process that led to it, right? So the process that maybe had to do with prototyping and consideration of materials and sustainability, but also thinking about the human body and ergonomics, of course thinking about aesthetics and function and use, how much it cost, who is it for, how's it going to be used, how durable is it, which is also a sustainability issue. So all of these factors that led into the thinking and all the development of it, the way the team worked together, the way, is it going to be commercially successful? Do we test market it, right? So design really is a process, is sort of the invisible part of design, because when we look at the final thing, whether it's a tabletop game or video game or chair, that's invisible. But I think for teaching design, focusing on the process is really the main thing. Because what you get at the end is sort of the residue or after effect of a process. So in the book, it's really about process, learning about the design process, and the essays are about things like collaboration and critique and communication and how you can work with other people through iteration and playtesting. And the exercises take you through all the phases of the process of design. For example, the brainstorming at the beginning, there's sort of techniques for brainstorming. This is about having decks of cards that you come up with. And Anna Kaiser told me she has a similar exercise, and you sort of reveal them as constraints for brainstorming. Sometimes you're modifying a game, like the classic card game War, a project over time, analyzing it, iterating on it, and modding it. And let's play one more exercise that is called A Good Collaborator from the design section. Now, normally I would sort of get out of this program and we won't do it now, and get a word processing program and sort of take notes as we're talking. But let's see if I can take notes more like this. So this exercise is really simple. It's something that I use both in my commercial work and also in school and projects. And it really consists of, it's a one-step exercise. This question, what makes a good collaborator? So let me ask you all, what makes a good collaborator? What's one thing? Yes. Compromise, so the ability to compromise. Okay, can you give us a little more detail? What do you mean by that? Right, great. So listening, taking into account other points of view, love it. Yeah, what's another one?
The ability to build on other person's ideas.
Ah, so the ability to build on other person's ideas. So in other words, not just contributing your own, but adding to it. I thought you were going to say a deep knowledge of pool as the, no. Sorry, just teasing you. Building on others' ideas. Okay, what's another one? Yeah, here in front, Katie. What? Communication. What do you mean by that? Ah, okay, so you're not just talking about good graphic design, you mean being in communication, letting people know if you're gonna meet your obligations or not, if you can come to a meeting. Great, yeah, another one. Ah, love it. Let's hear another one from the back. To give
Just give that.
Oh, hello. Have you met my box? So does anyone want to push my button? I feel like I have a co-host here. Okay, so I'm almost at the end. We should be okay. So this becomes a document that almost becomes like the constitution for the class or for a project, right? I mean, look at this list: compromise, building on each other's ideas, communication, being constructive and supportive, giving and receiving criticism well, self-knowledge about your capabilities, being able to take the initiative when you need to. Wouldn't we all want to work with that person, right? But we can't change other people. You can only work on yourself. What I like about this exercise is that often when you say what makes a good collaborator, if you phrase it like, okay, let's define who we want in a group, people will say, don't be a jerk, right? It's sort of like, don't do the negative thing. But nobody thinks they're a jerk. This is more aspirational, right? And you can use this in many ways. So then this document becomes, for the group, a way of checking in. For example, if there's a conflict in a group and someone is, for example, late to a meeting and doesn't communicate, it's one thing to say, hey, you didn't let us know. But it's another thing to say, hey, we all agreed that we were going to sort of aspire to these values of what makes a good collaborator, and you can point to this. I also use this in postmortems. So after a meeting is over, or after a project is over, we can look at the document and say, okay, which of these are you working on? Which is your weakness? And then you can share with the group, oh, I'm working on this, yes. And then someone might admit that they're a bad communicator, right? So that, because there's sort of a structure that facilitates that, as opposed to just feeling defensive, for example. So this is a really, really simple exercise, but again, it's about the design process and things that I've learned about over time. And I should also say I have a confession to make. I'm not a great collaborator all the time. I tend to get very excited and talk over people, and I have my own things that I'm working on, and definitely as someone who's like, I don't know, an established professor, and I'm like a white American guy, I should not be stepping over people or talking over people. So I'm also working on being a better collaborator. And I'm just mentioning this as a way of saying, this book is not about me. I found all the answers and I'm preaching to them. I'm just really sharing with excited about sharing with everybody what I'm working on and what my approaches are and that I'm trying to evolve as well. Okay, so that's the quick tour and a few examples of looking at these important concepts and this book, which I'm so happy to share with you and talk to you about. Again, whether you're in school now, maybe working with classmates, or also if you're out of school and maybe working with teammates at a company and looking for ways to deepen an understanding of design and also deepen our understanding of how design connects to systems outside of design in this very broken world in which we live, and hopefully help us better understand each other and ourselves in order to play well together. Thank you very much. Okay. And I think I need to hang on to the box. Now, I know I went a little long. I guess I went an hour. We're supposed to have time for questions. Can we go a little bit late? Take a question or two?
We'll go a little bit over.
Okay. Yes.
Where do I buy the book?
I recommend that you buy the book at Princeton Architectural Press or another non-Amazon place to buy the book. But you can get it, you can get it online. Are there anything else? Maybe not said it all. Yes.
I don't know how to frame it. Do social media companies follow game design rules? Because there is competition when people interact with each other.
Right.
To keep the interaction, to sustain the interaction.
What do you think? Do they?
I think it does. I would like to.
You're saying, do they consciously think about it as game design, or is it sort of a similar set of design problems or challenges?
The design is, do they consciously think?
Right. I think yes and no. I definitely, like for me, this idea of gamification, which I'm not a fan of. There's one of the essays in the book is called Against Gamification. But this idea of like, oh, what can social media learn from games about engagement and rewards and levels and that kind of thing. So I definitely feel like those forms of social media are looking at games. I also think that games are sort of an ancient form of media that has pioneered a lot of the things that they're trying to do. But for me, the problem with gamification is that it's sort of strip mining the surface of games. Like it's getting rewards and punishments and levels and points, but it's sort of leaving the soul of play behind, right? The creative misbehavior, the idea that play could be a critical lens for looking at the world, is sort of left behind by gamification, right? So to put it another way, we talked about this as a chair, right? Every design implies a model of what it means to be human. So this chair implies that a human is a certain size and weight, but it also implies that they have a certain amount of money to spend, their posture should be a certain way, that they're going to like this chair or not like this chair, the target audience. So every design implies a model of what it means to be human. The gamification and often social media, and I know I'm generalizing, social media is a lot of things, it's not one thing, but the gamification model of what it means to be human is like the rat in the cage pushing the button to get the reward, right? A very impoverished idea of what a person is. So that's sort of part of my problem with it. So I would say because games to me are both things, like they're part of the problem and part of the solution. So I think that maybe social media is looking more at the bad parts of games. And so maybe some of these ideas could be relevant in thinking more humanistically or more broadly about the design of those experiences. Is that getting at your question a little bit? Thank you.
Was there a question in the middle?
I was thinking when you were ripping out a page of the notebook, the audience member, it's just like a planned thing that you do more often to like present, hey, this is how we can also like bend the rules, push some buttons, because right now I'm in this position, I'm the speaker, so I can do this.
I have never done that before. Usually what I do is I have my own notebook and I have a Sharpie and I have it ready and I write on it and I show it. But what happened here is that we had a lot of trouble with getting the slides ready, which was nobody's fault. But so I didn't have time to do that. And then I realized I don't think I have a Sharpie with me, I only have a thin pen. If I wrote on with a thin pen, then you're not going to see it when I write it. So that was the whole thought process. And I saw your notebook, and no, I don't normally do that. But maybe I like the critique that it's maybe like a weird, like it's a little bit of the privilege of the speaker to sort of transgress and like basically destroy someone's possession a little bit, right? So, yeah, but it's a really interesting example because, yeah, like I think this is the interesting ambiguity of play, which is also the title of that great book by Brian Sutton Smith, The Ambiguity of Play, that it's, yeah, I think it's both things. Like you could frame what I did as sort of like an uncomfortable exercise of privilege, or you could frame it as like an interesting example of breaking the frame with the audience, right? And one would see it as more of an exercise of power inappropriately, but another could see it as like a undermining of that power, right? And I don't know what the answer is, but it's nice of you to bring it up. But yes, just to show you, I was improvising there. It's not something I normally do. The writing on the card and showing it, I have often done that in this talk, so that is a part of the talk. So yeah, so you're getting a little. I'm not quite as a lot of the stuff that I do I've done before other times, but I'm not. I'm glad to say that sometimes there's always new stuff that happens, right? And there's always new behavior in these games that I'm seeing. Either I have seen people skip numbers before, but I haven't seen that move in Zen counting was new today. So again, in these systems, that for me, that's what's exciting as a game designer, is seeing people play games in new ways each time.
We can have one more question if there is.
One more question? Yes.
So OpenAI recently released Sora, the one that allows AI to generate videos. So based on what you just described now, because we came up with the ideas spontaneously.
Yes.
How do you see in the near future OpenAI?
AI.
Technology might affect game design. A lot of the students that aspire to be game designers.
Right. How do you see AI affecting game design? I'm curious.
It's fascinating. So I can actually, by doing research, I can get results way faster than before, right? And it generates images, videos that might be in the future very hard to distinguish. Actually generate very similar, artificial intelligence. I think it's quite exciting in the capabilities that it can afford us to do new things, but like the spontaneity, that like the ability to generate these original ideas, will AI be able to do that?
I think yes and no. I mean, I think it's interesting right now. It's definitely AI is going to be have a big impact on media and content and culture, and I think it already is. I'm not using AI that much right now in my projects, and I think it's because often, so AI right now is good at generating assets, right? In sound, videos, images, even text. But I haven't yet found a way to have AI design interactivity, put together the rules of a game. It can put together something that looks like the rules of a game, and then you play it and you realize it's just like a collage. It's not a functioning system, right? So it's kind of like you can have an AI generate the blueprint for a building because it can look at blueprints and it can mix and match them, but you should not build those buildings because they probably will fall down. They're going to have stairways that go to nowhere. They're going to be they're not functioning systems, right? So maybe AI will get to the point where we will co-design games with AI. Maybe we're playtesting with AI. I don't know. Well, already we're playtesting with AI, but maybe in a more loose and open way. So for what I think I would say something else if maybe I was an image maker or a blurb writer. But as a game designer, I think AI still is not yet getting at sort of the core of what my exercises these exercises are about, which is really about how people interact with each other, how a system of rules results in unpredictable play. But in general, I think I was old enough to grow up with calculators, but I remember in earlier generations felt like calculators are basically going to destroy people's brains because the necessity of adding numbers and that arithmetic literacy and knowledge was so fundamental to critical thinking and to logical thinking that the calculator is going to destroy that. Now, did it? No. Kids still learn to plus and minus, but we mostly use calculators now, just like we mostly use spell check now. So for me, AI is kind of in that spell check calculator It's a tool. It's maybe a more interesting or bigger, sophisticated tool, and it's going to change what we do. But it's as much as it's going to replace what some people are doing, it's going to make other things possible. We were having a really long discussion the other night about AI and games, and what we said is that yes, AI can generate a lot of generic stuff, but to know why it's generic, exactly why it's generic, and what you need to do exactly to change it to actually make it more creative and interesting, that still takes a lot of skill and experience and a trained eye or a trained, editing brain. And I think that's not going to change. So am I answering your question a little bit? We should end it here. The last thing I want to say is I am here for the day. I'm having lunch. I'm visiting a class. I think we're going to the Museum of Games. So anybody that's here is welcome to join us on the day-to-day. Jaakko knows when things are happening and where things are happening. So if you're not part of those things already, you are really more than welcome to come. And I would love to have more one-on-one time and hang out or hear about what you're all working on. So thank you, everybody. That's it. And thanks again for having me.